I don't know who he is.
Clerk, please read
Okay. Clerk, please read the roll.
Adel.
Here.
Avedisian.
Here.
Buell. Camilleri.
Here.
Curry. Bella.
Here.
Callaghan. Gardeau.
Here.
Hall.
Here.
Healy. Hoffman. Holloway. Yono. LeBeau.
Here.
Lester.
Here.
Magnan.
Here.
Narada.
Here.
Osgood.
Here.
Payne. Here. Patel.
Here.
Salemi.
Stepped out for a moment.
Thank you. Solomonides.
Here.
Sweezy. Taylor.
Here.
Torres. Vecino. Here. Carrier. We have a quorum.
We have a quorum. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of the minutes for May the 6th, 2019. Is there a motion? It's been moved and seconded. Are there any additions or deletions to the minutes? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? One abstention. Okay. Public comments relative to agenda items. Okay. Report from District Chairman. Chairman was out of town, so. Report from the Chief Executive Officer. You can have my time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am going to be brief. I've got four very important things I want to talk about, and then I'll waive the rest of my time to District Council, because I know he has things to talk about, which I would typically cover. In terms of meetings, important meetings that are coming up, we are going to be having a meeting this coming Friday with a subcommittee for the pension fund, and to talk specifically, we've asked Becky Seelman to come in to talk about the options regarding the sale price of the Glastonbury land and how that impacts the pension fund. We talked about it's presently in there 12.5, and if we sold it for X dollars, how long would it take to bring that present value back to the 12.5? So she's going to be here to talk about that, and anybody who would like to attend that. In terms of contracts 3, 4, and 5 for the Clean Water Project, the tunnel project, I've been mentioning this for the last number of months, and the major concern, as you know, 2016, prior to bidding, there was a discussion with DEEP, letters gone back and forth regarding DEEP's request for us to break the projects up into multiple projects because of cash flow for their funding, clean water funding requirements. We agreed to break those up into 5 contracts, and the contract 2, which is the largest of the 5, which is the main tunnel which we're building right now, which is about $280 million contract. The remaining contracts 3, 4, and 5, our expectations were we were going to receive about $75 million in grant for a total project cost for those 3 contracts for $150. We've been waiting for the bond commission to be held. DEEP has indicated that they support and do support this $75 million in grant, but they need a bond commission hearing. We have yet to have a bond commission hearing. We were supposed to bid contract 5 in February. We have held that contract. We felt it was extremely important to notify, although the state of Connecticut, DEEP is aware of holding the contracts. EPA is also part of the consent decree, has not been notified. So I sent DEEP, EPA a letter, and I believe we copied all the commissioners. And I went up on May 30th with Bart, Chris, and staff to talk to EPA specifically about the issue. And so the discussion really, although giving them, the meeting lasted a good 2 hours, so we just gave them a full update in terms of what we're doing. But the real important part is that for EPA is part of the tunnel contract. As you know, the tunnel is serving two purposes. It's eliminating SSOs up to a 25-year storm in West Hartford and Newington, and it's also eliminating overflows to the Weathersfield Cove, and it's also capturing storms up to 1 year level control in Hartford. So it's a dual purpose. So contracts, remaining contracts 3 is a pump station which takes the storm and sewer out of the tunnel and brings it to the plant. Contract 5 handles the SSOs in the West Hartford and Newington. Contract 4 addresses the overflows on Franklin Avenue area for the Weathersfield Cove. EPA could force us to build contracts 3 and 5 without the state funding. I don't believe it's in the interest of EPA, and I explained this to them, that if they force us to build these projects without the grant money, the two things are a problem. One is it's going to increase our special sewer service charge, clean water surcharge, almost 60% from next year. The rate was planned to be $4.50. It would raise it to $6.60. So that's a major problem. And what I had said to EPA, and I've in writing, and I've said to the state, is that if we were forced to do this, not only are we going to see the increase to the customer, but remember, there's another $1 billion worth of work to be done in Referendum 3 that most likely that sharp rate of increase would really make it almost impossible for us to probably be successful in a third referendum. So we're asking EPA to hold off until after July, and hopefully there is a bond commission hearing in the August timeframe. They took that into consideration. We're waiting for them to respond to that request. I have talked directly to Betsy Wingfield from DEEP about that meeting, explained to her the substance of the meeting, and that we're waiting for that response. So the other major issue, which really we weren't aware of, and Ernie Lorimer from Bond Counsel made us aware of this, is there's what they call a deviation letter. So we've used it in the past, and basically it says you can proceed with the project even though there's no funding available, but the DEEP authorizes you to proceed, and if funds are available, grant funds are available, you will be reimbursed. They cannot commit the legislature, obviously, but it's basically DEEP's as a state agency committing that under their policies and procedures, if money's available, you'll get the money. Unfortunately, what Ernie had explained, which we weren't aware of, was that the grant monies come from the state, really, in terms of general obligation bonds, and in order for us to move forward with the projects, we would need to get revenue bonds. We would need cash to actually perform that additional $70 million that we're expecting to get in grants. We would have to fund that some way. How would you fund it? You would fund it through a revenue bond of some sort. And what Bond Counsel has indicated is as soon as you utilize a revenue bond, you cannot reimburse it from the state funding. So I explained that to EPA. I've explained that to DEEP and said in writing, deviation letter, which again you all have received a copy of, we really have no options except to wait to see if the state bond commission meets. We do know that the governor has budgeted $75 million for 2 years in his budget. We're hopeful that there is a bond commission hearing in August. And we're going to revisit that after August. So that's all I really have to say about that. We're just in a holding pattern for that issue with contracts 3, 4, and 5. In terms of the sewer user ad valorem work group, I did get a request from the mayor whether or not we could do an annual sewer reporting document.
Mayor
Mayor of West Hartford, Ms. Sherry Cantor. And her purposes for the report it was, in terms of not so much talking about the ad valorem study itself and whether we get rid of ad valorem, but it's more about being able to explain the actual cost for providing sewer service by town. And also a mechanism to help educate the public. As she expressed, it's very difficult. We all know this. We have a problem explaining it, how complicated the ad valorem is. Most of the customers, our customers in a town, which are taxpayers, truly don't understand what ad valorem is paying for and that it's paying for your sewer service. So she felt that this document would be benefit for her, the councils, to explain in detail, here's what it costs to provide sewer service in your town. We don't disagree with that. We agree with it wholeheartedly. We've actually asked that all of the towns agree to not only the study, but what's in the study and what the format of the study is. So we're just waiting for the 8 towns to agree on what the format looks like. But we've already told Raf Tellis, our consultant, that we're going to move forward with that. The one thing that we did discuss, though, and I did discuss with the mayor, is that the challenge with analyzing what the sewer cost in your town, and I again provided copies of this letter to all of you, is that, and I'll just use West Hartford as an example, they use 16% of the water consumed, and we produce approximately 47 to 48 million gallons. 16% of that is 8 million gallons. So they're using 8 million gallons of drinking water from daily from the MDC. And we know by measuring the sewer on a dry day from the Clean Water Project, we know that they're providing us with approximately 8 million gallons of sewage. So the numbers make sense. You're consuming, I mean, there's a loss in terms of watering your lawn and those kinds of things, but overall, approximately 8 million, 16% of the water is being consumed by West Hartford, and they're sending us approximately 16% of the sewage. But on a wet day, we're getting not 8 million gallons of sewage, we're getting 80 million gallons. So there's a cost to actually treating that 80 million gallons. So what I explained to the town manager and to the mayor and to the other town managers is that when we do this cost analysis for how much it costs to treat sewer in your town, we can't just think about what you're using for drinking water. We also have to look at the cost of dealing with that groundwater or stormwater. So that's more complicated, and we're going to do that. But again, we're working with all of the towns to agree on what the format is and what information everyone is looking for this report to provide. So that is a very important thing that I think all of our towns, I also offered the mayor and the town managers, all the town managers, that we'd be more than willing to come in to the councils and explain this report on an annual basis so that everyone can understand, here's what it costs overall for the MDC to treat sewer for 8-member towns, and here's what it costs in your town. In combination with that, we also are dealing with specifically stormwater and inflow from residences in West Hartford. And as you know, I did receive a number of letters, one in February, which I believe, again, we provided copies to the commissioners, The challenge that we have in all of our towns, not just West Hartford, but the challenge we have in all of our towns is these homes were built in the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s. And our region, the Hartford region, is basically clay-based. So there's a high groundwater table. We mentioned the other day at the meeting in West Hartford on June 6th that the groundwater table is like a foot below the surface. So the challenge that we have is, we talked about 8 million gallons of sewage on a dry day, 80 million gallons on a wet day. That water is, that additional water above the 8 million gallons is not supposed to be in the sewer. How is it getting in the sewer? It's getting into the sewer through basements, through connections, through homes that were built in the 20s. They had high groundwater table then. And so the way that they handled it was they put drains under the floors, under the foundations. That French drain, so to speak, collected that groundwater and it sent it to the sewer. And so there was no problem. There was no problems for a number of years until the system gets older and older and it starts to leak. And then, in addition, expansion in towns becomes a major problem. And now the sewer system is overwhelmed. So we've been talking with the towns about, and because West Hartford has the highest amount of groundwater coming into the system, we've been talking to all of our towns about enforcing their ordinances, because our consent decree requires us to remove inflow. So water's coming into the pipe two ways: either old leaky pipes, that's our responsibility, or inflow, which is from private property, and that's the town's responsibility. So we're asking all of our towns, we've had multiple meetings with the town engineers and town managers over the years, to look to enforce their ordinance to disconnect inflow, private property inflow, from the system. That's been a real challenge, because in a lot of cases where there is inflow coming into our sewer system, most likely it's because there's no storm system in front of their home. So we've been working with the town of West Hartford to try and develop an MOU. We have a draft MOU that we have sent to the town, and we would need approval from this board. They would need approval from their council to engage in that. But what we're looking to do is to partner with our towns, and specifically Newington and West Hartford, and in some cases Weathersfield, to remove that inflow. How do we remove that inflow? The best way to remove that inflow is to have a permanent solution to get rid of the stormwater forever. And that way is for the town to build a storm system, we build a sewer or improve our sewer system, and jointly we build a project. That's basically what the MOU says. It also asks that the towns enforce their ordinances and notify us when, during the permitting process. As you probably know, over the years, there's been a lot of basement bathrooms that have been built either with or without permits, and we're asking the towns to support the MDC and making sure that those are not illegal connections. So we've got a lot of work to do. The town had a meeting, requested the MDC to be there on June 6th. We were. It was basically a presentation, and I think the one thing that we can say is that there is starting to become, there's a recognition by the residents and now by the town engineers that stormwater inflow, that 80 million gallons a day of wet weather, is truly not the MDC's, the sewer company's responsibility. It's the town's responsibility. The challenge for the towns and for the MDC is we're not trying to point fingers. We're just trying to acknowledge the problem and find a solution for the problem. The problem that the towns have with stormwater is just like our sewer problem. It's been created over 100 years. It's not anyone's fault. We're just looking to solve it. And so the solution is, as we build projects and as we improve the sewer system, we're looking for the town to also implement a stormwater program. And unfortunately, the town residents are looking for answers yesterday, but there is no magic bullet. The town cannot afford, the MDC cannot afford to solve this problem in 1 year. It's financially impossible and physically impossible. So the goal for us is to solve it over a long-term solution, find quick wins where there are existing storm systems in the town. If the town feels that the existing storm system it has the capacity to handle a direct connection from a homeowner, then we will do that. But we are going to bring this issue back to BPW for Commissioner Vecino's review. We need to, as you know, we have a disconnect program which includes approved disconnect program, which includes disconnecting a stormwater inflow and providing a sump pump and a backwater valve and discharging it to the back lawn. What we're going to propose to BPW is, in some cases, we'll still have to do that. But when there's circumstances where there's a new CIP project, a capital investment by the town, any town, not just West Hartford, and they can build a storm system, we're going to propose to pay for the connection from the home to the street line. Town pays for the storm system in the street, but we're already spending $4,000 to $5,000 just in our disconnect program already per home, and we still have to deal with the problems year after year after year, whereas if we spend $10,000 to $12,000 one time, the problem's gone forever. So we're not going to do obviously anything until BPW approves that program. It would be an ordinance change, and we're going to be presenting that over the summer. The town has approved West Hartford has approved $100,000 to do a stormwater study. They actually have hired CDM Smith, which there's a benefit to that. Lessons learned with the Clean Water Program. They have approved an additional $200,000 for next year. So they are committed to being a partner in solving this problem, and we're going to do everything we can to support them in that. Nope. Okay. And then just one other, two other issues, really important. I won't belabor on the Streamflow, but we've been working, as everyone has, every water utility, to address Streamflow regulations. As we've been saying since 2014, there was an exemption applied to the Streamflow regulations in November of 2014, and what it identified, the exemption was if a segment of a river has been designated wild and scenic, it is therefore exempt from Streamflow. So that specifically identifies our West Branch, Goodwin Reservoir, in terms of exempt, although we're still releasing a minimum Streamflow of 50 CFS, which is 32 million gallons. We had it clarified in committee that because MDC actually releases minimum 32 million gallons a day to the West Branch of the Farmington River, that exemption extended to our other drinking water reservoirs on the East Branch, which is Neepog and Barkhamsted. So we've been talking this through with DEEP for a number of years, and the acknowledgement verbally has been that we are exempt from what Commissioner Klee had said at committee in 2014. We have been asked to submit the Streamflow regulation forms anyways, even though there was an acknowledgement that we are exempt. I received a letter this last week that is now questioning and looking for documentation on that exemption. So we're going to respond to that. We have the documentation, but it is an issue that we've expected to come forth, and it now is. The other important thing is just an update on the decommissioning of Colebrook hydro facility. We have, as I think I reported, the hydro units have been removed. We did execute a work plan with the Army Corps so that, as you know, part of our schedule is being driven by the fact that the Army Corps needs to do a repair on their gates that allow the water to flow through the dam. So we've been working with them diligently to meet their schedule. We have had Hogback Commission meetings, and trying to keep everyone informed as to the schedule. Commissioner Buell has been coming to those meetings. And so we do have an executed agreement. We still do not have a date of when they plan to start their project, but they have committed in the work plan to giving us at least 60 days' notice. Through conversations with the Army Corps on the phone, they're expecting that they're probably not going to start anytime before August 1st. One of the biggest concerns the community has is safety in terms of releasing water. We've assured them that the way in which we release water will be no different than a riparian rights, and that it will be safe and orderly. So we are working towards the MDC being out from not only the hydro agreement, but also out of the, quote, project agreement, which means we will be no longer at the Colebrook Reservoir Army Corps Dam on January 1st, 2020. And that's it.
Are there questions? Alan?
Yeah, can someone give us an idea of what water consumption has been? I haven't seen those numbers of late. 'Cause I'm just curious, we've had a lot of rain and.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess, it's probably in the 42 million gallons a day range, Chris?
Yeah, it's been lower, it's trending lower than previous years.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Over the last month,
Yeah.
43
The range.
43?
and a half.
So this time of year, Commissioner, we're usually in that 42 to 43, leading from the spring into the early summer.
Because of the rain.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner?
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you, Scott, to you and your staff for the meeting Thursday in West Hartford. While clearly our residents were very disappointed, I think they were also very thankful that you and the town, came together and were able to answer so many of the questions. One of the issues I'm not sure you really touched on, though, was the point that as we fix the infiltration problem with our pipes, it's actually has an unfortunate
Yeah.
effect of people who have said they never had water in their basement before are now getting water in their basements, and they don't understand why.
Yeah, so that was the Cliff Note version of the meeting. But, yeah, I think the whole meeting, really, the whole meeting was about that topic. Educating the public to understand that one of the major questions was, why am I having a problem today? Forget about Lynbrook and the sewer collapse. That was an event that created surcharging. But now people are saying, you're disconnecting me as part of your program, you're installing a sump pump, and now I'm having water coming into my basement I never had before. So the majority of the meeting was to educate people to understand why is that happening, and why is it's happening is because all of the water that you're seeing in your basement used to go into the sewer pipe. And we all paid $800,000 in 2006 in a fine to EPA and to the state of Connecticut to get that water out. So educating the public to understand that as we improve our system, just like they have in their basement under their foundation a French drain, it's a perforated pipe that allows water to go in and go into the sewer. Our sewer pipe, as it aged, it became just like that, perforated through cracks. And it was allowing that groundwater to go into our pipe, and that's part of the 80 million gallons. And so as we line that pipe, guess what? Now it doesn't accept groundwater anymore, and now the groundwater table rises. So, and that was our point to the town, is that it's really a false sense of security to continue to blame the MDC that this is our problem, because it's not going to solve the problem. It's only going to get worse. As we've only lined 36% of the pipes in West Hartford. There's more to go. Our plan is to line 44% more. As we line pipes, the groundwater will continue to rise in certain areas of town. So the solution is to partner with the MDC and build storm systems so that that water that is going into your basement can go into trout brook where it belongs, as an example.
Further question? Commissioner?
The bonding, referring back to the earlier conversation, the bond, what's it called the bond commission?
Yeah, the bond commission, yes.
Right. So, I guess I'm naive in this. Why aren't they meeting, or why hasn't a meeting been called, or who are we waiting for?
Waiting for the governor to call it.
Yeah, the governor calls the bond commission, and obviously,
Okay, so.
Well, the governor calls it, I believe it's EPA Commissioner.
Deep.
I'm sorry, Deep Commissioner establishes the agenda.
OPM, Secretary of OPM.
Is anybody pushing on the agenda or pushing on the governor or Deep?
So I had a conversation with, Deep, with Betsy Wingfield, and not only the MDC, but a lot of the utilities across the state are in the same predicament, not to the level we are, obviously, but a lot of the utilities are looking for this bond commission hearing to happen as well. There's to the level of, CWWA, which is a political organization that we're all members of, that is fighting on behalf of the utilities. There's a lot of push. The state of Connecticut, Deep, is pushing, but the reluctance, typically, in my experience, there's not a lot of bond commission hearings when a new governor comes in, because the governor's trying to understand the budget, understand where they're spending money, but why, we don't know. But the challenge we have is we need a bond commission to approve the funding so that our grant monies can be provided.
Yeah, the bottom line issue is a political issue relative to the judgment of the governor in terms of calling the meeting. The legislature appropriates the money in the legislative session. Traditionally, and constitutionally, I believe, if you read the Constitution, that is a system that was put in place to make things work better. There's a question of whether it's constitutional, but whatever the case is, that's what we're living with today.
Mr. Chairman, also, Governor Malloy, before he left office, bonded a lot of money, which left very little in the fiscal year, the last 6 months of the fiscal year, for the Governor Lamont to be able to do anything. So it's kind of waiting till the new fiscal year starts, and a bond bill hasn't passed yet, so that's the other stumbling block.
Okay, thank you.
There's got to be an allocation of bonds to pay for whatever the governor and
I understand the reluctance to take on more debt, especially in this environment, but it seems to me, not only the MDC, but so many other entities, they need these people to meet.
He's keeping his promise.
That's not our decision.
I know.
Commissioner, do you want to talk?
The information which we prepare to educate public regarding sewer charges, etc., should be for every town, so that town leadership gets the support for their future projects, as well as educating people. When they see the bill, they don't complain to any one of us looking at it and say, what are you doing? So make sure that infiltration is properly explained in that public information process.
I will. Thank you.
Further discussion, questions? Okay. Thanks, Scott. That's a very lengthy, it's a very complicated issue, and I think just in closing, the other issue is this is in violation of EPA's regulations. What we wanted to make sure that everybody understands that is not our jurisdiction, and also we aren't participating in the process of the town not giving us access or them cleaning up the sewer situation. Okay, item number 8, report from the district council.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bart's away today, so I'm stepping in for him. First of all, you received, many of you who have emails received electronically, a copy of the latest and hopefully final draft of the complaint in the action titled Metropolitan District versus Connecticut Deep. That's the action we intend on bringing to stop the discharge of the landfill remediated groundwater into our sanitary sewer system. It's a complaint that's gone from approximately 20 paragraphs to now 84 paragraphs. We've met several times since the last board meeting. We were hoping to get the complaint actually out between then and now. Unfortunately, between schedules and the amount of meetings we've had on the complaint, that was not possible. We are at a point where we have the draft that was sent to you today. There's hard copies in the back. If anyone either doesn't have email or doesn't want to print it out, they can have a hard copy in the back table. What we're asking for is both a temporary and permanent injunction to preclude or stop DEEP from discharging from the landfill into our sanitary sewer system. We're asking for, this is an additional remedy, we're asking for an account of the $20 million that was transferred to DEEP by CRA when DEEP took over the landfill. Part of those monies, as our understanding, was to be used for ongoing maintenance and operation of the landfill. And we would think that certainly the charge that we're assessing DEEP would be part of an expense that would be paid from that account. So we want to know where that money went, where it is, and what's the balance in that account. We're also asking for a declaratory ruling on judgment on the powers within the MDC charter to charge the fee, to modify the fee, and to refuse to accept discharges if the fee is not paid. So that's basically the nuts and bolts, the more substantive part of the lawsuit. You'll see in what was sent today and what's in the back, in addition to the actual complaint, there's 5 exhibits that we're attaching, the most important of which are the consent order and consent decree from the federal and state government on that amounts to the Clean Water Project and the impact that this has on the Clean Water Project as well. So that complaint, if you have any questions when you do get a chance to read it, be more than happy to answer. You know how to get a hold of myself or Bart, and we're available at your disposal to discuss. Tomorrow morning, Bart will be sent, we wanted you to see it, to get it first. Tomorrow morning, Bart will send a copy of this to Bob Clark, who's the counsel to the governor. As in the last letter we received from DEEP, we were invited to contact Bob Clark to discuss this matter. This is going to be the contact, this complaint. Assuming we don't get any positive results from forwarding the complaint, and based upon the actions of DEEP thus far, I'm not terribly optimistic that that would happen, but assuming we get nothing, we hope to have this in the sheriff's hands, marshal's hands by the end of the week. If there is some positive response, then we'll report back to certainly the chairman and the CEO and communicate to the commissioners where we are. And maybe there's some light at the end of the tunnel, but again, I'm not terribly optimistic. The other thing that I wanted to report on is just a very brief legislative summary, and I mean brief. Commissioner Hoffman, who's the chair of the Government Committee, was unable to be here tonight, so I want to give a full report to that committee as the Committee of Cognizance, and then we'll report back, obviously, to this board. But I did send an email late in the session as to where we are on certain things. All the items that we covered in the email did in fact happen, with one exception. 971, which was our bill relating to the bonding authority of the MDC, did not make it from the Senate to the House on time. That's not the end of it. There may be a bonding bill during the special session, or at least a bill of some relevance to municipal financing. I've spoke with Senator Cassano. He's going to try as best he can to try to get that 971 language incorporated into that bill. I can't make any promises, but we haven't given up this session on the substance of that bill. I know that Attorney Lorimer will be happy to hear that we haven't given up, because he's the one that alerted us to the fact that we could use that kind of bonding authority or flexibility. So, but with that...
Well, in effect, the legislature has not adopted the Bond Act. The Bond Act has not been adopted.
There's not been,
It's still
they did a budget, they did the implementers, Maureen, I believe, in the
Right.
Budget and the budget implementation bills are done.
are done. It's the bond bill. And, you know, there may be a special session on
There's going to have to
tolls
be a
that
special
may-
session to adopt the budget, because
No, we
No,
adopted
the budget and implementers.
Adopted the budget, but it doesn't officially go into effect unless it's accompanied by the bond act. It's my understanding of the law.
Well, I think you have the budget.
We actually
The
went 1 year
implementers,
without a bond.
yeah, the
act.
implementers were included in the budget, so that operational side is done.
Right.
I don't know if they're going to do a bond.
Well, you're talking about.
We're meeting tomorrow about it with the
Right.
administration.
With that, Mr. Chairman, and there's one last thing on the legislative. We have, I want to just thank Brendan Fox, Steve Bonafonte, and Janice Fleming, the new member of your lobbying team. They all did a great job keeping an eye on things, keeping a track on things. Brendan was there 24 hours a day for the entire session. And I've got to tell you, Steve did a great job on the Republican side of things, but I was thoroughly impressed with the work that Janice Fleming did as well. For a first-time lobbyist for the NDC, she really worked incredibly hard on your behalf.
agree with you.
And she got rave reviews, not just from the legislators, but also from our colleagues. Brendan enjoyed working with her, Steve as well, and myself. So if you see her, congratulate her and thank her for the hard work she did.
Are there any questions?
Just one, thank you, just one quick one. The delivery of the complaint, you made mention of if something doesn't happen, no response after a week, that it's in the marshal's hands?
Correct.
That's a euphemism for what?
Well, in order to initiate a complaint, it has to be, there's a service of process has to be made. So in order to serve someone with a complaint, you have to get an independent third party. In this case, you have to get a state marshal to take it from us and
Oh.
serve it upon the state.
Oh, so that's the original
That's the original
delivery?
That's correct.
Gotcha.
That's
Thank
correct.
you.
Right.
Thank you.
Andy?
What's happened with the water plan and the public trust? I understand we came to some agreement on that?
Well, yes, thank you for asking that. There was language that was added, not to the state water plan specifically, but to another bill relating to this issue where they actually, by association, amended the state water plan to provide that if there's a conflict between a provision within the state water plan and a provision within the general statutes, the provisions of the general statutes prevail. And why that's important is we try to incorporate by specific reference into the state water plan all Connecticut general statutes relating to the supply, preservation, use, distribution of water. And there are more than just that which is referenced in the state water plan. You remember the one that was referenced was a right of a private citizen, in effect, to challenge the use of water by either a public or private company, and the adoption of this public trust doctrine. Well, I don't know the number, but off the top of my head, there's got to be at least 15 other statutes that talk about water. And talk about public water and private water, but water as a resource, and the availability of that resource, not just for good things like preserving the environment and things of that nature, but also for development, industrial, commercial use, certainly public consumption, residential consumption, and the like. So we wanted to incorporate everything. We got a lot of pushback from every other source, including the governor's office and many of the legislators. We finally reached a compromise, and that's the language that I just cited. It doesn't do all that we wanted it to do, but it does enough so that where there is a conflict, the statutes, which I just referenced in general number, approximately 15, would take precedence over the terms of the state water plan.
Very good, thank you.
I had the same question, Andy. Yes, that question. I got the message in an email that you sent, and I wasn't really sure about that. So we would prefer that it be, the interpretation be from the state statutes. That's what you're saying. So that we, without actually changing the language in the water plan, we did sort of get support for what we were trying to do, which is hold everyone to the state statutes about our ability to manage water supply.
And I will tell you, the governor's office stepped up and saw our position as a legitimate, good faith attempt to modify the state water plan constructively, not to be obstructive. But so they stepped up and they crafted that language that was, some people came to the table willingly, others had to be prompted to the table, but they all signed off. And I will tell you that if the state water plan had not been approved by the General Assembly in this session, under the statute that created this whole process, next session, it would not have been considered by the legislature, and it would have been up to the governor to either sign or not sign. Not modify or revise, but sign or not sign the state water plan as it existed prior to that little minor tweak, minor change. So
Thank you.
we're fighting an uphill battle,
Larry?
but to tell you the truth.
Garrett?
I'd just like to compliment our legal people and our lobbyists. That was a nice finesse job on that, the way you did that. And then going back a little bit on the legal actions that we're taking. So following up on the delivery by the marshal, what happens next? What are the next steps?
Well, certainly the state is not going to agree with our position, so that would be easy if they did, but they're not.
That'll be a
So
choice of the.
They'll have.
This goes directly to the judge,
No.
so
It's a request for a temporary and permanent injunctive relief.
Okay.
So, and I don't want to get too technical, but in the courthouse in Hartford and every other judicial district in the state, that takes on it's called a special proceeding. That takes on a different course of action, a different schedule than a regular, motor vehicle accident suit, or collection suit by way of example. So it gets specifically, there's a specific call date, there's an exchange of information within a certain period of time. It's a relatively expedited process. And then, in most cases, we're given the choice, because we've asked for temporary and permanent injunctive relief, to, rather than have two trials, one for each, on the temporary side and then again on the permanent side, to have an expedited trial schedule, to have one trial that deals with the whole of the issue in one proceeding. And it's, the courts offer you that in lieu of having two hearings, and they offer it on an expedited basis so that you get some relief, some word from the court sooner rather than later. A regular lawsuit, Commissioner, would take 2.5 to 3 years to, this would be accelerated to be 9 to 12 months.
can I just follow up, Mr. Chairman? So the whole idea of going through the claims commissioner and having the state allow us to, how does that come into play?
I'm glad you
in
brought
this?
that up.
That's a different process.
That's a different, thank you, Mr. Chairman, that's a different process.
Lawsuit.
That's a collection of a debt that we think the state owes us. So that's really talking retroactively, is what the state, up until a certain period of time, owes us for a fee that they did not, that we think we charged
So we're working on
appropriately,
that at the
they
same
did not
time.
pay. While that's going on, and we're still waiting for the Claims Commission to rule on that, from this point, we want to say, well, let's stop the bleeding. From this point forward, let's get a decision from the court that says, you've got to find some other place to discharge your effluent than the MDC sewer system.
Basically, there are other options for the state to eliminate that landfill discharge other than our sewer. And we believe it's there, and
Thank you,
that's the
Mr. Chairman. Thank
injunctive
you.
action. Further questions? Rich?
Quick question, the determination that this stays in state court with the involvement of EPA, it wouldn't go up to federal?
Well, EPA is not in this lawsuit, it's deep,
Has nothing to do with it.
so, no, it's going to stay in state.
Just to follow up, Gary,
If for some reason, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, if
Go
for
ahead.
some reason DEEP wants to bring in EPA, for whatever reason,
Right.
I mean, I happen to have a theory that DEEP has the permitter and the permittee of the permit as a
got a little
conflict.
conflict there.
So I'm not sure that it shouldn't end up in
Federal
EPA's
court,
hands eventually, but right now, it's where it should be.
Gary, just for clarification, where it is now is in the governor's lawyer's office.
Right.
And then subsequent to what, how many days?
Till Friday.
Till Friday, if there's no activity one way or the other, then it'll move into that process of pursuing the issue. Further questions? Okay. Item 9, Board of Finance, consideration and possible action regarding authorization for issuance of general obligation bonds and general obligation bond anticipation notes, June 10th, 2019. Is there a motion to receive
So
the
moved,
report
Mr.
and
Chairman.
adopt the resolution? Now, there's 3 parts to this.
Yep.
John, can we take them one at a time?
Well, the operating budget, or the operating transfer is a separate item.
Okay, so that's got to be second.
Yep.
So we'll take up A, authorization of issuance. This is from the Board of Finance.
Yes.
So moved, Mr. Chairman. And at a meeting earlier this evening, the Board of Finance adopted the resolution unanimously and recommends passage to the District Board.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Item B, operating budget transfer. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved, Mr. Chairman. In the same circumstance, at a meeting earlier this evening, the Board of Finance adopted a resolution unanimously and recommends to the District Board.
Is there questions? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Item 10, personnel and pension and insurance, consideration of and possible action regarding settlement of a pending workman's compensation claim, possible executive session. Is there an executive session?
Yes, there is.
There is a motion.
Chairman,
Is there a motion to adopt?
yes, there's a motion.
Been
to go-
moved and seconded. Is there a motion for an executive session?
So moved.
Yes, so moved.
It's been
Second.
moved and seconded.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, this would be for all 4, and the purpose of the executive session is that it involves the settlement of a claim and also may involve some discussion about health-related or medical-related issues.
Do we
Okay.
want to also make a motion for the executive session for number 11, which relates to the sale of real estate?
Yeah, the one right after.
You want
Mr.
that in
Chairman.
executive session?
Yeah.
Is there objection to the combining the 2 issues, so we go into one executive session to deal with 2 issues? Without objection, the motion is before us.
And number 11 just so relates to the sale and value of NDC real estate, which is the purpose for the executive session on that one.
Up by the police station.
Okay, who do you want to, same people for,
Kelly, Chris Levesque, Lisa Remsen, John Myrtle, Bob Zeik, Attorney Wolinitz.
Oh, no, way back.
that's it? All those in favor of motion to go into executive session on the 2 issues?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
It's fenced in, and there used to be there used to be there's a barbed wire fence around.
10 was on the table, we went to executive session. The articulation here is Robertson, 125, Santos, 90,
Yes.
Basie, 75, and Young, 22. Am I right?
22.5.
22.5, I'm sorry.
And that was approved unanimously in our committee.
Move it. Approve that?
Yes.
Is there discussion? Being no discussion, all those in favor of item 10 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Item 11, consideration of and possible action regarding sale of 348 Collins Street in East Hartford. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Are there amendments? I believe there's 2 amendments. Rich?
Well, one amendment was to return it to the board for final approval.
That's the last one. The first one would be to notify the town.
That's already
Notify
in
the
there.
town of East
Make the
Hartford.
one amendment.
So the only amendment that would be in order is that final disposition would be done by the board with the
Correct.
action of the chief executive officer will be referred to the board for disposition. Is there objection to the amendment? No objection to the amendment. Is there further discussion on the main motion as amended?
Aye.
If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. and that's recommendation of action, receive a report and adopt a resolution referral to the Water Bureau regarding water service petition from Chestnut Hill and Glastonbury. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Is this in the area of Glastonbury that has the uranium problem?
Yes. Chris, do we have a report on that?
The properties in question are around the Chestnut Hill area. There's been some recent articles in the news media regarding the petition and the presence of uranium in the groundwater. We received a number of petitions from the residents, and this is the request to move forward to the Water Bureau and proceed with the petition.
Is there further discussion? Obviously, there's water contamination. That's good for them. Is there further discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Resolve that issue. Recommended action on 13, opportunity for general public comments.
Good evening, my name is Chip Gear, and I live in that area, Chestnut Hill area, and there has been publicity, to be sure. A lot of us are very curious to know what next steps are to be taken, what the timetable will be for it, how we may be informed of those steps, and what involvement we can have. And so I don't know to whom you should direct me, perhaps to you, I don't know, but,
Why don't, okay.
yep, I'm sorry.
Are you finished? You have more to say?
No, that's just it, just that we would like to be involved.
The chief executive officer.
So-
Why don't
so-
you stay up there so we can...
So this is a public process, so we are mandated by ordinances to notify the towns, the non-member towns of water petitions, and we typically look for the support from the town to move forward with these types of projects. As you know, in a non-member town, the number of customers within that town pay for 100% of the project. There's been reluctance on some non-member towns to support those projects because, for example, in Glastonbury, we have 6,200 customers, but there's many more taxpayers in that town that the town councils typically do not want to burden the cost of that water main. So what we have done, because of the uranium and because of the verbal and documented support from DPH on this issue, we have asked our board, even though the town council of Glastonbury may not support the project, we're asking this board to support the project to move forward. And that's what we're asking tonight. So if the board approves, it will go to the Water Bureau. The Water Bureau will have, again, a public hearing, just like what we're having tonight, to talk about the specifics and look for approval from the Water Bureau to move forward with the project. So there's a number of public hearings that will go forward after tonight, and they'll be publicly noticed, and the community, Chestnut Hill, will be notified.
I guess then we are not following the normal process. We're following the process, but the town has refused to share in the capital cost, is what you're saying.
Well, so what we typically do in a non-member town is ask two things. One, do they support the project? And two, the option we have is the town can pay for the project, and then they typically, the only way that they could pay for the project is to assess all taxpayers in the towns. And the reason why they typically don't support it, because they don't want to tax someone who is still using well water. So our ordinances mandate that the people that are on MDC drinking water, 6,200 customers, they pay the cost of the project. Obviously, there's an assessment cost that the people that are actually getting the water pay, linear footage, and then the remaining portion of the project gets shared amongst the 6,200. We're simply asking our board to move forward with referring it to the Water Bureau. We will go through that process. We will send a letter to the town asking their support. We already know basically what the answer is based on town council meetings that occurred 2 months ago. Maybe it will change, but we will ask that of the town council, and we'll get a response. But we'll, based on this board's approval, we'll move forward without the town of Glastonbury's support.
If the board approves that.
If our board approves it.
Is there also the opportunity to solicit the Department of Health?
Yes, it will be part of the process. Yep.
And then we'll come back and a decision will be made by the total district board.
So if-
Timing on that? I think you asked about.
Yeah, the timing.
Timing, so we will, the next Water Bureau meeting is scheduled for
Wednesday.
Wednesday?
It's been
No, it's
canceled.
canceled. But we'll have to have a special Water Bureau because we're quarterly, so we will have if this board approves it tonight, we will hold a special Water Bureau hearing within the next month. And so I would suggest that within the next 2 months, we will be having our public hearings, we'll be engaging the town council, we'll be engaging DPH, and having our public hearings. But you will be notified of those public hearings because you're part of the community.
As a homeowner, in other words, we would
Yes,
be sent
correct.
something in the mail?
If you'll give us your address, we'll also send it
Yes.
to you.
All right,
Yep.
I'll
How's that?
somebody. Yeah, that sounds good.
Yes.
And you just give John your address.
I'll give you my card. You
He'll
can
give you a
contact
All
card.
right, very well, thank you.
We'll notify you
Okay.
or whoever else you.
Good.
Yep.
Thank you, sir. Opportunity, commissioners' questions and comments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I've been driving to work in the morning, and I've seen piles of dirt at the construction site, and I've seen the conveyor running. How far is the tunnel been bored?
The tunnel machine, and don't hold me to this, but we're probably in the 2,500-foot range, maybe a little more or less.
Right about that, we've been.
2,500?
80-foot progress days now.
Okay, so where we should be, about double that. And the expectation from the geotech engineers was we were going to average about 75 feet a day. Some days we would get 0, and we have gotten 0. Some days we get 200 feet. So in terms of schedule, based on drilling, we're about 59 days behind. We've notified the contractor of his responsibility to make up that time, but we've been going through, or the contractor's been going through a little bit of a lessons learned with the skilled labor on the project, and so we're working through that with the contractor.
Training time, is that what you're saying?
Well, it's, there was a decision made, which is a great decision for the state. There's a union that typically travels with a project like this, and they're referred to as national sandhogs. There was a decision made to utilize local unionized labor, which is fine. It's good for Connecticut. The challenge that Connecticut has is, if you go to New York and Seattle and all these other, DC, they're drilling tunnels all the time. So the labor force is there, it's trained, the capacity's already there. We as a state had to go through a learning curve, and so that's kind of partly what we're dealing with. But
Was that a consideration in the contract when we awarded it? Were they familiar with the problem?
that's a contractor decision. In terms of, and I would say that that's not the only issue. I mean, there's other issues that have nothing to do with the skilled labor force is the contractor's responsibility. But long and short of it, we're 59 days behind schedule. We've notified the contractor in writing of his obligation to give us a recovery schedule, and we're working through those issues with him.
Thank you.
Yeah, is Cone Resnick still on board, and are we still working with a temporary CFO?
Yes. So Cone Resnick has, as you know, has been working with us Initially, they started out working with us and helping us develop procedures and policies. As you know, Bloom Shapiro had given us audit comments 3 years in a row that referenced lack of internal controls, and that has been a discussion point we've had over the years. What that lack of internal controls really meant was following standard procedures and policies. Cone Resnick, in addition to helping us provide triage, staffing, augmentation, as you know, we had a number of positions vacant, including at one time the CFO position. They have developed, there's 3 components, deliverables that they need besides triage, is to provide us with procedures and policies for general accounting, which they have provided. They're also to look at staffing levels existing and the needs for the department, and they have done that. The next step is to go to the budget side, the budget group, Lisa's group, and also Treasury. The reason why we kind of had to take a break on those 2 deliverables because of the number of issues they were helping us just in terms of augmenting, getting the audit done. As we talked about last summer, the $90 million unspent bond funds, that was a major effort from them. So we are working towards finalizing those 2 other deliverables, and then we'll be implementing those procedures and policies. In addition to all of that, Kelly and Chris Martin, who's our interim CFO, is working on the BT side, coordinating all of those changes that we're making in the finance department to make sure that they're implemented in the BT process. So there's a lot going on in finance.
No, I just asked the question. I don't want to think that Chris is overwhelmed with not having a team with him, and I know
Yes.
Cone Resnick was doing a good
They
job.
are still engaged, and they're helping us get to the finish line with those deliverables.
Just a brief comment. First of all, Scott, thank you for having a conversation with me regarding the lifeguard problem. I know you're going to work on that.
Yep.
And as a result of that conversation, I ended up on a Memorial Day weekend taking a ride up to Lake McDonough. And I have to say, it was a beautiful day, and what a great facility for the people of the state and anybody who could access that. There were hundreds, if not 1,000 people that weekend having a ball. It was a great day, and the place seemed very well run, and everything seemed to be going very nicely, so thank you.
2 quick things. Chris, help me out with this. We've been talking to the town of East Hartford about 348 Town Street for like 20 years, 18, 20 years at least. I mean, it's like 20. So this is nothing new. This is just. And number 2, the clock, Mr. Chairman.
Tomorrow morning.
It says 4:45. Is that what it says?
We fixed that one, Bud. We fixed that one, but that one broke again.
I said, don't take your medication according to that clock because you're going to be in trouble. I mean, just, you know.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 quick things also. Last week, I had the opportunity to tour the approximate 2 miles from the boathouse in Hartford up to the Windsor line where Riverfront Recapture wants to increase their trails. And Mike Zalesky, the president, gave a wonderful tour, but the vision that he and his team has for this property and the opportunity, and the funding, I think, is pretty much in place, but the opportunity for them to maybe have some sustainable revenue way down the road is there. And I'm hoping as we near budget session, while I don't think we'll have to, fund any of this, he'll make the presentation on this to us because it's pretty exciting. The second thing I have, there was an article in last week's paper, long-term employee of MDC who's also a town council or city councilman in Hartford, talked about 20% taxing of nonprofits, which above and beyond that, but he also mentioned two or three nonprofits, one of which was MDC. And then he added, and it's in quotes, that he only mentioned those because he didn't want to touch organizations that did things for the community. And I was a bit taken back by that. Now, a few years ago, we were meeting at our facility across from Brainerd Field, and I don't recall the reasons why, but we had asked your administration to put together a list of what we do for Hartford and the costs associated with it, and it was a huge list in the millions of dollars. I think we need to bring a revised list up to date, because if we have one council person who is unaware of what MDC does for the community of Hartford, I think we need to educate the entire council to be sure they understand that we're not a standalone out there. We're partners with Hartford and all the other member towns.
Don, I think he was referring to the nonprofits, not the public nonprofits.
Well, that's not how it was written, so anybody reading it.
It mentions MDC.
Yeah, I know it did mention MDC.
He mentioned MDC as along with the other public.
Right, that he wanted to tax 20% because we didn't do anything for the community, is how I read it. And so I'm just asking if we can put another revised list together to educate the city council of Hartford.
I think he lived in East Hartford.
What have you done for us today? You won't even remediate the property on Collins for it.
That piece of property. Further discussion, questions?
Move we adjourn.
If not, the proper motion is
Yeah.
required.
Okay, the best part.
All right, excellent.
That's the way to end the meeting.